I handed the front desk clerk my identification twice. She still could not find the room my sister had confirmed for 3 months. Vanessa stood behind me, lifted her cocktail, and said, "The group block was for real families, married couples, and children." I took the handle of my suitcase and walked away. By sunset, my phone showed 47 notifications. They were not calling because they were worried about me. They were calling because, at 7:12 that evening, my grandfather opened the final rooming list and discovered that my name had been removed, and that the credit from my room had been used to upgrade my sister's suite. To understand why I did not scream in that lobby, you need to know that I had spent most of my life turning things that hurt me into logistical problems. A few months earlier, I was 36 and living in Boston, where I directed clinical quality for a medical device company. My job was built around records. I reviewed files, questioned altered data, saved every email, and noticed when someone answered a different question from the one I had asked. 6 managers reported directly to me, and 28 people depended on my ability to remain calm when facts became inconvenient. At work, I never allowed anyone to call evidence a misunderstanding. With my family, I did it constantly. I translated favoritism into poor planning. I called exclusion a scheduling error. When my parents stayed silent, I told myself they simply did not know what to say. I was good at making other people's choices sound accidental. It was the one form of quality control I never applied honestly. My older sister, Vanessa, had a husband, a daughter, a large house outside Cincinnati, a luxury SUV, and a winter vacation almost every year. Her husband, Ryan, described himself as a logistics consultant, although no one in the family had ever met a client, heard a company name, or seen him leave for a meeting. My parents, Daniel and Elaine, lived in a house with more bedrooms than people, belonged to a golf club, and spent part of every winter somewhere warm. No one discussed money. Bills seemed to disappear before they reached the table. I had occasionally wondered who paid for everything, but I always stopped myself. Families had arrangements. I thought, it was not my business. I did not keep returning because of Vanessa. I returned because my grandfather, Arthur, was 84. I returned because Vanessa's 7-year-old daughter, Sophie, still ran toward me as if my arrival were the best part of any holiday. And I returned because, 10 years earlier, my grandmother June had held my hand in a hospital room and asked me not to abandon the people I loved. For years, I confused that promise with permission for them to abandon me. I had tried to set boundaries. 3 Easters earlier, I stayed in Boston after Vanessa changed the family schedule without telling me the next morning. My mother sent a video of Sophie sitting on the kitchen counter. "Does Aunt Mara not love our family anymore?" she asked. I knew a 7-year-old had not invented that sentence by herself. I also knew exactly who had placed it in her mouth. I bought a ticket that afternoon. Then, in March, my mother called with the bright, organized voice she used when an event had already become a production. "Grandpa Arthur turns 85 in July," she said. "We're spending a week at Harbor Crest Resort. He's covering the event, and Vanessa is handling the rooming list." "I'll book my own room," I said. "That will be easier," Vanessa called 5 minutes later. "Don't complicate the system," she said. "Grandpa reserved a group block. I'm handling everything." I confirmed with her twice in writing. The first time, she replied, "All set, 2 weeks before the trip." I asked again. She wrote, "Stop checking. You have a room." I had done everything a careful person was supposed to do. What I did not know was that my room had once existed. Vanessa had not forgotten to reserve it. She had canceled it, and she had made that decision long before I reached the lobby. The flight from Boston to Savannah took a little over 2 hours, but I had been rearranging my life for the trip since April. I moved a clinical review meeting that 6 departments had spent weeks coordinating. I rented a car, packed Arthur's birthday gift in my carry-on, and wore a blue dress because June used to say that color made my eyes look brighter. I told myself the effort mattered. Arthur was turning 85. People did not get unlimited chances to show up for someone they loved. Harbor Crest Resort sat behind a row of palms near the water. All white balconies, polished stone, and staff uniforms the color of sand. I pulled into the circular drive just after 2 in the afternoon. The valet greeted me by name after checking the arrival list, which made what happened at the desk feel even stranger. That was when I learned everyone else had arrived the day before. No one had texted me about the change. They had already eaten dinner together, taken beach photographs, and planned the next morning without me. I had barely stepped out of the car when Sophie came running across the lobby. "Aunt Mara!" She hit me around the waist, hard enough to make me laugh. She was 7, sun-warm, and still young enough to love people without calculating what that love might cost. "We saw dolphins," she said. "Daddy dropped his phone in the sand and said a bad word, and Mom has the room with the biggest balcony." "The biggest balcony?" Sophie nodded proudly, as if she had personally negotiated it. Vanessa called her name from across the lobby, and Sophie ran back before I could ask anything else. I went to the front desk. The clerk smiled, asked for my identification, and typed my name. Then she typed it again. Her smile changed. "I'm sorry, Ms. Bennett. I don't see a reservation under that name." I gave her my confirmation details, then my phone number, then Arthur's name. She checked again. "There is a group block," she said carefully. "But I can't disclose information about other guests. The resort is fully committed for the holiday weekend. You'll need to speak with the person managing the rooming list." I opened Vanessa's messages. "Stop checking. You have a room." Before I could call her, my parents crossed the lobby. Elaine looked at my suitcase, then at the clerk, and said, "I thought you were still planning to book your own room." I held out my phone. She read the messages. I watched her eyes move across the screen. She did not apologize. "This isn't the right time to turn it into a problem," she said. Vanessa arrived carrying a cocktail with a slice of lime floating against the glass. "You said I had a room," I told her. "I said the group block was handled." I showed her the message. "You wrote, 'You have a room,' for the first time." Vanessa paused. Then she lifted one shoulder. "The rooms were prioritized for family units." I looked at her. "And what am I?" "You're the only adult here without a family of your own," she said. Her voice stayed low and almost reasonable. "Don't make me turn something obvious into an argument." That was how Vanessa did cruelty. She dressed it like common sense and waited for everyone else to admire the fit. I looked at my father. He could have offered me his room. He could have told Vanessa to fix what she had done. He could have packed his bag and moved with me to another hotel. Instead, Daniel sighed. "You're the most flexible person in this family," he said. "Help us get through the week." Elaine suggested I sleep on the sofa in Sophie's room. No one suggested that Vanessa give up the suite with the largest balcony. I could feel all of them waiting. Vanessa wanted tears, anger, something dramatic enough to repeat later over brunch. My parents wanted me to absorb the inconvenience quietly, so they would not have to choose. I took hold of my suitcase. "If the rooms are for family," I said, "I'll find somewhere that doesn't require me to prove what I am." Then I turned toward the exit. Behind me, Sophie asked. Why isn't Aunt Mara staying with us? No one answered her. My phone started vibrating before I left the resort driveway. 6 notifications before the gates. 17 by the first bridge. Not one of them contained the word sorry. Not even once. Not yet. I drove along the coastal road with the resort shrinking in the rearview mirror and my phone vibrating in the cup holder. The first motel I tried had no vacancy. The second had 1 room left only because another guest had canceled 30 minutes earlier. The sign outside read Sand Dollar Motor. Lodge in faded blue letters. The building was old, 2 stories of white concrete facing the road, with the ocean visible between neighboring roofs. The owner introduced herself as Rosa Alvarez. She did not ask why I had arrived alone in a blue dress with a suitcase and a face that looked too composed. She checked my identification, charged my card $149 plus tax, and slid a brass key across the counter. Room 12, she said. Ice is beside the stairs. There's a grocery store 2 blocks inland and a sandwich place open until 10. That was all. No questions, no pity, no suggestion that I should be more flexible. It felt like the first honest transaction of the day. Room 12 had an air conditioner that rattled every time the compressor started, a bedspread patterned with sailboats, and a balcony barely wide enough for 1 plastic chair. If I leaned toward the railing, I could see a slice of ocean turning gold beyond the rooftops. The brass key was heavy in my palm. My phone kept lighting up. At first, the messages sounded reasonable. Mom, we can still fix this. Dad, call me. Vanessa, you are overreacting. Come back before dinner. Then the tone changed. Elaine reminded me that the family photograph was scheduled for 7. Vanessa told me to explain to Arthur that I had chosen to stay somewhere else. Daniel said my absence would worry him and asked whether I really wanted to upset an 85-year-old man during his birthday week. None of them asked whether I had found a safe place to sleep. Then Ryan sent a message to the family thread. The resort's event manager was preparing the final rooming list for Arthur because he had ordered a lemon cake delivered to every room before dinner. 30 seconds later, Vanessa called 3 times in a row. That was when I understood the urgency. They did not need me back because they missed me. They needed my body inside the photograph and my silence inside the story. I sent one message. I am safe. I will not return tonight. Do not use Sophie to call me. I will talk when someone is ready to tell the truth about the room. Then I silenced the phone. By sunset, there were 11 missed calls, 7 voicemails, and 29 texts and group notifications, 47 attempts to reach me, not one apology. I sat on the narrow balcony with the brass key beside my hand and remembered the earlier versions of the same lesson. The Christmas photograph taken before my delayed flight landed. Everyone wearing matching pajamas beneath a fireplace garland. My mother promised they would add me later. They never did. The cousin's wedding where Vanessa, Ryan, and my parents sat beneath the chandelier while I was placed at a table beside the kitchen doors. The beach trip when I had been told couples received priority and booked a separate hotel at my own expense. My mother's 60th birthday, when I paid for the cake but was not mentioned during her speech thanking everyone who had made the evening possible. I had called each event an oversight, a timing problem, a seating problem, a communication problem. Sitting outside room 12, I finally stopped changing the name of it. I had not been forgotten. I had been assigned the position that could be sacrificed without changing the picture. At 7:12, the screen lit with Arthur's name. I answered immediately. Mara, he said. His voice was quiet. I asked the resort to send lemon cake to every room. The event manager sent me the final list. I looked at the key. "Your name isn't on it," he continued. "But it was on the March list." Neither of us spoke for a moment. "Where are you?" he asked. "Sand Dollar Motor Lodge, room 12. "Who told you there was no room?" I could protect the people who had not protected me, or I could give him the truth without decoration. Vanessa said the rooms were for people with real families. Arthur was silent so long I checked the screen. Then he asked, "Mara, do you know who paid for the room you were not allowed to use?" Arthur did not answer immediately. Instead, he said, "I paid for the hotel. I paid for Daniel and Elaine's flights. I paid for Vanessa, Ryan, and Sophie. I paid for the dinners, the cabana, the activities, and the birthday events." I stared at the thin strip of ocean beyond the motel roofs. "Your ticket was the only one I did not pay for," he continued, "because you bought it yourself." Then his voice changed. "I paid everyone to come to my birthday. Mara, the only person who paid her own way is the one who does not have a room." He asked for the motel address. He told me not to call anyone at the resort and not to delete a single message. Then he ended the call without saying goodbye, as he had done my entire life. About an hour later, an old silver sedan pulled beneath the faded Sand Dollar sign. Arthur stepped out wearing pressed khakis and a white shirt buttoned at the wrists, as if he had driven from a board meeting instead of a birthday resort. He did not hug me immediately. That was not how Arthur handled worry. He walked into room 12 and inspected it the way he used to inspect houses when his company still built them. His eyes moved across the sagging mattress, the rattling air conditioner, the water stain near the window, the receipt on the table, and finally the brass key beside it. Then he looked at me. "Tell me straight," he said. "Do not protect anybody." So I told him. I showed him the first message from Vanessa, confirming the room. Then the second one telling me to stop checking. I showed him the message asking me to tell him I had chosen another hotel. I showed him Elaine's warning about the family photograph and Daniel's claim that my absence would upset him. Finally, I opened Ryan's message about the resort, sending the final rooming list. Arthur read everything twice. Then he photographed each screen with his phone. "I believe you," he said. "But tomorrow I need records. I will not give them the chance to say you manipulated an old man." He sat in the motel's only chair while I remained on the edge of the bed. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. The air conditioner kicked on with a metallic shudder. Outside, the evening traffic moved along the coastal road, and somewhere beyond the buildings, families were quietly gathering for dinner together. Then Arthur asked, "How long?" I knew what he meant. How long had they left me out? How long had I turned cruelty into scheduling mistakes? How long had he failed to notice? I could not answer. My silence did. Arthur lowered his eyes to his hands. "I always thought Vanessa needed help," he said. "Your father never learned how to manage money. Your mother panics when anything becomes uncomfortable. And you—" He stopped. "I thought you were strong enough not to need anyone." I looked toward the balcony. "That is not the same as not noticing when no one saves you a place." He nodded slowly. "I kept lifting the people who fell," he said, "every time. And because you stayed standing, I left you standing alone." It was the closest Arthur had ever come to apologizing, but I was not ready to rescue him from the weight of it. He reached for the brass key. "Who paid for this room?" I did. "All of it?" "Yes." I met his eyes. "I always pay for my own room." Arthur turned the key in his palm. The number 12 had been stamped into the metal so deeply it had darkened with age. "This family owns a great many expensive things," he said. "But this may be the only one that truly belongs to the person holding it." He placed the key beside the receipt. Then he stood. "I am not making decisions tonight," he said. "Tomorrow I am meeting the resort's event manager, my accountant, and Rachel Kim." Rachel was his estate attorney. "I want to know who canceled your room, where the credit went, and what else my money has been paying for." He walked to the door, then paused with one hand on the frame. "The room did not make me begin doubting them," he said. "It only made it impossible for me to keep pretending my old doubts were unreasonable." By 9 the next morning, Arthur had already begun asking questions. The resort's event manager met him in a small office behind the ballroom. She brought printed copies of both rooming lists. The March version included my name. The final version did not. The cancellation request had come from Vanessa's email address. It carried her electronic signature and a note stating that I was not certain to attend. The credit from my room had not been refunded. It had been applied to an upgrade, an oceanfront suite with the largest balcony in the family block. Vanessa had canceled my room 3 days after I sent her my flight itinerary. 2 weeks later, she had still written, "Stop checking. You have a room." Arthur called his accountant next. The records showed what my family never discussed aloud. Daniel and Elaine received a fixed monthly allowance. Arthur paid their golf club dues and part of their insurance. Vanessa and Ryan received a separate transfer. He had funded the down payment on their house, covered the lease on their SUV, and paid Sophie's private school tuition. Ryan had also received money for 2 supposed business ventures. Neither had produced revenue. By noon, Rachel Kim had joined them. She helped verify that Ryan's logistics company existed mostly on paper. There was a registered LLC, a polished website, and professionally printed business cards. There were no paying clients, no signed contracts, and no business tax filings that matched the success Ryan regularly described. None of that was criminal. It was simply a performance. And Arthur had been paying for the stage. Then Rachel opened Arthur's current estate plan. Vanessa was designated to receive the largest share. Daniel would control part of the family trust. I was assigned a modest amount and several personal items that had belonged to June. Beside my name, Arthur had once dictated a note. "Mara is fine. She does not need help." He read it twice. For the first time, Arthur saw that his generosity had not been neutral. He had rewarded dependence because dependence made him feel necessary. He had treated my independence as evidence that I required less love, less protection, and less inheritance. The system had not formed around him. He had financed it. Later, when he told me, his voice was lower than usual. "I thought it was praise," he said. "It was only a polite way of overlooking you again." Arthur did not confront anyone immediately. He came to lunch at the resort and behaved as if nothing had changed. I sat beside him while he asked mild questions over iced tea. "When did you finalize the rooms, Vanessa?" Vanessa said late June. The resort record said March. "Which client are you working with now? Ryan?" Ryan named an industry but not a company. "How are you planning to cover the club dues next year? Daniel?" My father laughed and said investments were doing well. Arthur asked, "Which investments?" Daniel changed the subject. Then Arthur asked who had told me to arrange my own room. Elaine said she thought I had offered. Vanessa said no one had told me anything. Ryan said he had not been involved. My father said the hotel had probably made an error. Arthur did not argue. He did not accuse anyone. He simply allowed each answer to stand beside the next until the lies formed their own structure. That afternoon, Elaine came to the Sand Dollar Motor Lodge. She stood inside room 12 holding her purse with both hands and looking at the air conditioner as if its noise were personally offensive. Vanessa said you might be working, she began. I sent her my flight information. I know. That answer changed the room. Elaine admitted that she and Daniel knew the reservation had been canceled. Vanessa had said there were too many rooms and that I could make other arrangements if I came. My parents had objected briefly, then stopped. Vanessa would have made the entire trip miserable, my mother said. You know how she gets when she feels challenged. And you knew I would solve it. You always do. There it was. My competence had become the family's permission slip. You did not choose peace, I said. You chose the person who would punish you if you did not give her what she wanted. Elaine's face tightened. She asked me not to say anything at Arthur's birthday dinner. She said the family was already frightened, that Arthur was old, and that public conflict would humiliate everyone. I am not planning a scene, I said, but I am also done being the person who erases the evidence after everyone else is finished. The private dining room overlooked the ocean through a wall of glass. Beyond it, the water darkened from silver to blue while the birthday cake waited beneath a spray of white flowers. A family slideshow played silently beside the windows. Arthur appeared in almost every photograph. Vanessa, Ryan, Sophie, Daniel, and Elaine filled the center of most frames. I appeared only a few times, usually at an edge, half turned away or partly hidden behind someone taller. At each adult's place sat a sealed envelope with a name written across the front. No one knew what was inside. Sophie sat near the cake, swinging her feet beneath the chair, unaware that every adult around her was calculating what the envelopes might contain. Even the servers seemed to sense the tension and disappeared. Arthur waited until the plates had been cleared. Then he stood without raising his glass. For years, he said, I used money to quiet my guilt, keep my children close, and avoid conversations I was afraid to have. I bought comfort and called it peace. The room became still. I thought I was helping this family stand, he continued. What I was really doing was making sure some of you never had to learn how. He placed 2 sheets of paper on the table. The first was the March rooming list. My name appeared beneath my parents'. The second was the final list. My name was gone. Arthur laid an invoice in front of Vanessa. Mara's room did not disappear, he said. Vanessa exchanged it for her balcony. Vanessa's face tightened. She wasn't sure she was coming. Arthur placed copies of my flight itinerary and Vanessa's messages beside the invoice. She sent you her itinerary 3 days before you canceled the room, he said. 2 weeks later, you told her to stop checking because she had one. Vanessa looked toward our mother. Elaine lowered her eyes. Arthur touched the envelopes. Each of you has a written explanation. The authorized cards close after dinner. Voluntary monthly transfers end in 60 days. Rachel will honor every legal obligation I actually signed. Daniel pushed back from the table. I have obligations. That is why you have 60 days to begin managing them, Arthur replied. I explained that a transition fund would cover essential housing, medication, and Sophie's reasonable needs. He would not continue paying club dues, luxury vehicle leases, upgraded suites, vacations, or undocumented business ventures. No one is being abandoned, he said, but the performance is no longer being financed. Ryan opened his envelope, read the first page, and went pale. This will destroy my reputation. Arthur looked at him. With whom? The clients who do not exist? Ryan's mouth closed. Elaine began to cry. She did it quietly, with one hand over her lips, but she still did not look at me or say she was sorry. Vanessa did. She turned toward me with tears rising fast, anger giving them shape. You knew what he would do, she said. You used Sophie to make him destroy her life. Before I could answer, Arthur spoke. Sophie has lost nothing because Mara told the truth. She may lose a lifestyle the adults around her never paid for. That is not the same thing. Then Arthur looked at me. Did I misunderstand anything? The old reflex rose immediately. I could soften it. I could protect my mother. I could make Arthur less severe and become useful again. My family might thank me. Vanessa might finally need me enough to pretend she loved me. Another part of me wanted to watch her lose everything she had treated as proof that she mattered more. Both impulses frightened me. You did not misunderstand what they did, I said. But do not change everything only to punish them for hurting me. Change it because you do not want to keep financing a lie. Arthur held my gaze, then nodded. The cake remained untouched. One by one, people folded their papers and left the table. No one sang. No one asked for a photograph. Outside the dining room, Vanessa caught my arm. From now on, she said, everything Sophie loses is because of you. I removed her hand without answering. I knew the accusation was false. I knew who had canceled the room, who had lied, and who had funded the life now changing. But knowing something is false does not stop it from finding the place inside you that is still afraid it might be true. Her words followed me all the way back to Boston. The first week back in Boston, my phone behaved as if the previous 2 years had never happened. Daniel called more times in 6 days than he had in the 2 years before that. Elaine sent photographs of Sophie eating breakfast, carrying a backpack, standing beside a swimming pool. Aunts and cousins I barely heard from left messages about how family was family. Ryan emailed me a 12-page proposal for a new marina logistics venture and asked whether Arthur might consider one final bridge. Not one person asked what it had felt like to stand at the front desk with my suitcase while everyone watched. I listened to one voicemail from my father, in which he spent 4 minutes discussing Boston weather before asking whether Arthur had mentioned reconsidering. My mother's photographs always arrived without captions, as if Sophie's face were an argument no decent aunt could refuse. Even the relatives who preached forgiveness never asked Vanessa to apologize. They asked me to become easier to forgive for telling the truth. Every message led to the same request: talk to Arthur. So I sent one reply to the family thread. I will not act as an intermediary about money. I am willing to discuss our relationships when each of you is ready to acknowledge what happened without asking me to repair the consequences. After that, I stopped answering calls about transfers, cards, houses, or club dues. Nothing collapsed overnight. Daniel's golf club card stopped working because Arthur had removed his authorization. Elaine began listing furniture online and canceled the winter trip she had already planned. Vanessa met with a realtor to learn what the house might sell for. Ryan attended his first job interview in years. Their luxury SUV would be returned when the lease ended. Sophie's school offered a temporary payment arrangement while her parents considered other options. For the first time, my family sat around a kitchen table with a budget that did not begin with Arthur's bank account. No one was homeless. No one lacked food or medicine. They were simply meeting expenses that had always existed. Only now the bills had their names on them. One night, I stood in my kitchen, rinsing a coffee cup, and began to cry. Not because they were losing money. I cried for the family I had spent 36 years expecting to arrive. I had believed that if I remained patient enough, useful enough, successful enough, someone would eventually save me a chair without being asked. That family had never existed anywhere except in my imagination. 3 weeks after the dinner, Vanessa appeared in the lobby of my office building. I almost did not recognize her. Her hair was tied back without styling. Her raincoat was wrinkled. She wore no careful makeup, and the shadows beneath her eyes looked honest. She had flown from Cincinnati on a basic economy ticket and carried only a canvas bag. We sat on a bench near the elevators. For the first time in years, Vanessa said true things. She had not paid her own phone bill since she was 23. She did not know what their insurance cost. She had signed mortgage papers without understanding the interest rate because Ryan and Arthur had handled everything. She did not know how much Ryan earned because, as she finally admitted, he had never really earned anything. "I'm scared," she said. The words were small, and for a moment I saw the sister who used to braid my hair before school. I felt sorry for her. Then she took my hand. "Talk to Grandpa," she said. "Get him to restore the transfers. We'll sell the house if we have to, but we need time. If you help us, things will change." I waited. "You'll be invited to everything," she continued. "Every holiday, every photograph. We'll book your room first. You'll stay with us, not somewhere else. You'll be treated like a real member of this family." There it was. Not an apology, an offer. "You just tried to sell me something that should never have had a price," I said. Vanessa's expression hardened. "You have always wanted to be chosen. I'm giving you the chance." "No," I said. "You're giving me an invoice." She released my hand. The elevator doors opened, but neither of us moved. Then she stood, adjusted the strap of her bag, and walked toward the revolving doors without saying goodbye. That evening, Arthur called. "Rachel has prepared a new plan," he said. "I want you sitting across from me when I sign it." Arthur's house in Bluffton was smaller than the one my parents lived in and worth less than the cars they had driven through the years. It had one story, a narrow porch, and a kitchen table scarred by decades of meals. June's ceramic bowl still sat beside the sink. Rachel Kim was already there when I arrived. She placed a folder in front of me and explained that Arthur wanted to amend his revocable trust. A professional trust company would hold and manage the assets. I would not be the trustee, but I would serve as distribution advisor and principal beneficiary. If Daniel, Elaine, Vanessa, or Ryan requested money beyond the basic support already defined, the request would come to me. I would decide whether it met the standards Arthur wanted written into the trust. Arthur folded his hands on the table. "You are the only person in this family who understands what a dollar weighs," he said. I wanted to say yes. I imagined Vanessa having to call me instead of Arthur. I imagined my mother asking rather than assuming. Ryan would have to submit documents, explain numbers, and prove that a venture existed before receiving another cent. No one would leave me out of a photograph again. No one would risk insulting the person who could approve their requests. I would have security for the rest of my life. I could pay off my mortgage, leave my job if it stopped meaning something, and never again calculate whether a family trip was worth the cost. I did not only want the money, I wanted notarized proof that I had finally been chosen. Rachel opened another folder. "This is the current plan," she said. Vanessa had been assigned the largest share. Daniel would oversee part of the family trust. I had been given a modest cash gift and several objects that belonged to June. Next to my name was a note Arthur had dictated years earlier. "Mara does not need assistance." Arthur stared at the sentence. "I used your maturity as a reason to give you less," he said. "I told myself it was respect." His voice tightened. "It was another way of overlooking you." That made the new offer harder to understand. It came from love, but also guilt. It looked like justice, but it could become another system built around Arthur's need to correct the past. Rachel uncapped a pen and placed it beside the folder. I did not touch it. I need 48 hours, I said. Arthur looked surprised, but not offended. I need to know whether you are giving me a gift or a lifelong job, he nodded. Rachel recommended that I speak with an attorney who represented only me. Arthur agreed to pay for the consultation. I refused and paid for it myself. That evening, I returned to the Sand Dollar Motor Lodge. Room 12 was available. Rosa recognized me, checked my identification anyway, and handed me the same brass key. The air conditioner still rattled. The ocean remained a narrow blue strip beyond the rooftops. I sat at the small desk and made 2 lists. What the money could give me. Security, freedom from work I no longer wanted, a permanent home, power, recognition. Then I wrote what the authority could turn me into, the person who answered every desperate call, the person everyone flattered, the person blamed for every refusal, the person deciding who deserved stability and who did not. The next Arthur, the following morning. My attorney reviewed the proposed trust and said something no one in my family had ever taught me. You can accept an inheritance without accepting control. She explained that I could refuse the advisor role and still receive assets directly. Arthur could leave me property or a fixed inheritance without making me responsible for anyone else. Declining everything was not the only ethical choice. Receiving a gift does not mean someone has purchased you, she said. The question is whether the gift requires you to surrender your freedom. That sentence followed me back to room 12. I placed the brass key beside Arthur's folder and finally understood the choice. I did not have to reject everything to prove I was different from them. I only had to reject the part that could turn me into them. I returned to Arthur's kitchen 2 days later with the brass key from room 12 in my pocket and my own attorney's notes folded inside my bag. Rachel sat at the same table. Arthur had placed the proposed trust documents in front of my chair, but the pen was gone. I have an answer, I said. Arthur nodded. I will not serve as distribution advisor. I will not decide who deserves help, who receives an exception, or whose emergency is real enough. I will not become the financial center of this family, and I will not accept any arrangement that teaches people to flatter me before they ask for what they need. Arthur looked down at his hands. If I take control, I continued, I stop being your granddaughter. I become a transaction counter with the family phone number attached, Rachel wrote quietly. Then I told them what I was willing to accept. After Arthur's death, I would receive the small Bluffton house where he and June had lived. I would also accept a fixed inheritance equal to the amount Arthur had once provided for Vanessa's down payment. No authority over anyone else. No power to approve or deny family requests. No conditions requiring me to remain close, forgive anyone, or manage the consequences of their choices. I will accept the house if you are giving it, because you want me to have a place that always made room for me, I said. Not because you are trying to compensate me, and not because you want me to manage the family. Arthur's eyes moved toward June's ceramic bowl beside the sink. I have spent a lifetime learning how to give without trying to purchase something in return, he said. Let me practice, for Daniel and Elaine. Rachel proposed an independent support trust managed by a bank. It would provide a fixed monthly amount for housing, ordinary living expenses, and medical needs. It would not pay golf club dues, luxury travel, or image maintenance. No Bennett would control it, including me. Sophie's plan was separate. Arthur would fund an education account and a bank-administered education trust. Payments could go directly to a university, community college, trade school, certification program, or other approved training. Vanessa and Ryan could not withdraw the money, borrow against it, or use it as leverage. Sophie would never have to smile correctly, choose sides, or audition for an education. Vanessa and Ryan would receive no restored lifestyle allowance. They would have access to a one-time transition fund limited to vocational training, licensing fees, professional certificates, and reasonable moving costs. Every payment would require an invoice or reimbursement receipt, no cash transfers, no money for speculative businesses, vehicles, vacations, or cosmetic versions of stability. It was not abandonment. It was assistance designed to end. The largest remaining portion of Arthur's estate would establish the June Bennett Scholarship Fund through a local community foundation. The scholarship would support students paying part of their own tuition, people working while studying, and first-generation students entering college or skilled trades. An independent committee would select recipients. No member of our family would choose who deserved the money or receive gratitude for releasing it. Arthur leaned back in his chair. I rewarded the people who refused to grow up, he said, and I punished the one who had to grow up too early. Then do not reward or punish anyone this time, I said. Build something that does not need gratitude in order to work. Rachel read the principles back to us. She reminded Arthur that these were instructions, not finished legal documents. The trust company would review the structure, tax counsel would examine the transfers, and the formal papers would be drafted before anyone signed. 10 days later, after separate reviews and revisions, Arthur executed the new plan. But that afternoon at the kitchen table, the important decision had already been made. When the meeting ended, Arthur opened a drawer near the refrigerator and removed a plain brass key. The spare, he said. He placed it in my palm. I reached into my pocket and touched the key to room 12. For a moment, I held both. One opened a room I had paid for myself. The other opened a home offered without asking me to rescue anyone or earn their love. Several months later, Rose's cottage was sold. The money remained inside the trust. I did not win the house or force anyone to admit the sale was cruel. When I learned that the buyers were a young couple with 3 children and a golden retriever, the news hurt. Still, I pictured those children running through the yard. I hope they wear the porch swing out, I told Jasmine. My mother continued attending church and garden club meetings. She kept friends, committees, invitations, and familiar places to belong. Her version of the anniversary night was that I had gone through a period of emotional instability and embarrassed the family. But her words no longer became truth simply because she spoke first. Aunt Diane began checking stories before repeating them. Some women at church paused before agreeing with Evelyn. Lydia stopped forwarding my messages to our mother. Dad called me without asking permission. My mother did not lose her entire life. She lost her monopoly on the story. Dad called on the first Sunday of every month. We talked about the hospital, old cars, the cottage, and the weather. He never gave me the apology I once needed. I never pretended our relationship had become something larger than it was. It was a bridge wide enough for 2 people, and we learned not to carry the whole family across it. Lydia's wedding took place the following spring. I was not invited after refusing to apologize. I nearly drove to the hotel anyway. I sat in my car with the address open on my phone, then closed the map and drove to a garden center instead. Jasmine met me near the seed racks. "What do you want to plant today?" she asked. "Something that can survive the winter." I had not completely forgiven Lydia. Rose's recipe box still rested in my kitchen, though, and that meant a bridge remained between us. No one was forcing us to cross it before we were ready. My 36th birthday arrived on a warm Saturday. The backyard is filled with Jasmine and her daughter, nurses from my unit, a family whose child I had once cared for, my elderly neighbor, and friends from outside the hospital. My co-workers had pooled their money to build me a long wooden table with 8 seats. The number was intentional, Jasmine said, and maybe slightly cruel. I laughed. Zinnias grew along the fence from seeds inside Rose's recipe box. For once, I did not arrange every plate, check every dish, remind anyone to arrive on time, or remain in the kitchen while everyone else sat outside. Someone pulled out a chair. "Mara, your place is here." No one asked me to perform a task to keep it. At sunset, someone took a photograph. All 8 chairs were occupied. I was laughing. The zinnias were bright behind us, and Rose's lemon cake sat in the center of the table. I never posted that picture. A year earlier, I had needed a photograph to prove what happened. This year, I needed no proof. Some photographs are not evidence. They are simply your life happening while you are finally present for it. For most of my life, I thought freedom meant someone would eventually save me a chair at their table. I was wrong. Freedom was walking away from the table where I kept being asked to earn my place and learning to build one of my own. Being needed can make you feel important, but only when someone loves you without requiring your service do you understand what belonging feels like. Have you ever realized that someone needed what you did for them but never truly valued you? Share your story in the comments. Your words may help another person understand that they do not have to keep paying for a seat. Send this story to someone who always shows up for others but forgets to save a place for themselves. Subscribe for more stories about family, boundaries, and finding your way back to your own worth. I was no longer the daughter who had to earn a place at the table. I was simply Mara, and for the first time, that was enough.